Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Carry On Friends, the Caribbean American Experience. And I'm excited because my next guest is the third person to come on the podcast in its almost 10-year history representing this country. So, my guest today on the podcast is Jael. And Jael, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you very much, Karen, for having me on. I truly appreciate it. And thanks to all of your listeners for taking in a listen to the show.
All right, so why don't you tell the community of friends a little bit about who you are, this Caribbean country that I'm talking about, and the work that you do?
Oh, wow. Where do I start? First of all, I'm Dominican from Dominica. That is the nature island of the Caribbean. So, not to be confused with the Dominican Republic. So, I'm from Dominica, which is located between Guadeloupe and Martinique. I was born and raised there. I left there when I was a teenager and moved to Canada, where I essentially became a woman. So I became an adult in Canada. I got to experience life differently. I lived with my aunt. I was away from my family for quite some time. Um, and what do I do? Boy, where do I start is the question. I consider myself multi hyphenated in the sense I do a lot of things. I could say without tooting my own horn that I do it well. So I have in my lifetime, I just celebrated my 40th, by the way, a
Boop,
few
boop,
days
boop, boop,
ago.
boop, 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 boop.
Yeah, thank you. But in my lifetime, I've been a massage therapist, I've been a dental assistant, I've been a cosmetic manager, I've been an announcer on radio, I studied marketing, I have a degree in journalism, and I have a master's in media production. I've created film. I've created talk shows. I've produced for well known people, in theatrical sense and theatrical sphere. I have yeah, I have a really long
You
roster,
know,
as you call it,
you
a
know,
long
you
like
know.
us most Caribbean women.
I was about to say, it's typical Caribbean people settings, just one bag of things, one
Yes,
bag of things that you
yes,
do.
we do a lot of things.
So I'm just gonna say, what makes your name familiar and your face familiar. Many people may not have watched this, but because I know what's some of what is going on in the community, you were on the inaugural Caribbean Music Awards, right?
I was.
And you had a little time with the one Wyclef and you haul him up a little bit.
Well,
But
I would say I hauled him up. I feel like when we're in spaces that we can do advocacy for whatever reason, I feel like it's always an opportunity to say, so it might not have been what I did. It might have been something else if there was probably Dominican representation or small island representation at the awards. It might have been something else. Um, because I'm always trying and looking to how I can help bring up the underdog. And that is essentially my nature. And being on the Caribbean Music Awards was something that I worked for because it wasn't something that was like given to me free of charge. It was a competition I entered, and I won the competition to be on that stage. And being on that stage meant that I was going to represent my country, represent myself, and representing my country, which was not represented at a music awards where Dominican music is actually one of the fundamental foundational music for one of the biggest genres like soca. So to be not recognized, it kind of made me uncomfortable, and it would have not made sense if I had not said anything. So I felt like I had to say something. So I wasn't calling out anybody, and I felt to some extent that it was the first show, and they were trying their best, because at the end of the day, I feel like they selected who they selected because they needed to make a mark so that they could get the respect of not only other award shows, but like the media, the mainstream media. And so I got that. But still, I would not have had it any other way if I had not said anything.
No man, you see when me Jamaican say haul up, I don't mean it in a negative way. It just mean
Okay.
that you call you say oi.
Hey.
Something I said that's how I meant it in that
Okay.
context. But I'm glad you took it there because, you know, I really wasn't going to go there, but I really since I have you, I want to talk about it. The Caribbean has a lot of musical genres.
Yes.
And let me back up a little bit. Share with the audience before I get into that question. Could you share with the audience the genre of music that is from Dominica and a little bit about that?
Oh, there we have a few genres. Um, but Dominica is known, well, in the 70s, a guy by the name of Gordon Henderson developed what was called Calypso. So Calypso was the drums, the fusion of African music with a little in Creole, because we do speak Creole. And he had a band called Exile One, very famous band, still very well known, especially in the French territories. If you go to France and you say Exile One, everybody knows who Exile One is. And so he developed this genre of music. And in those days, uh, they didn't have the equipment and the je ne sais quoi to record their music. So they brought in Ras, a shorty, also known as Nyla Blackman. I don't know if you know who Nyla Blackman is, big soca artist. Her great grandfather brought him to Dominica because he owned a recording studio in Trinidad. So he came to Dominica to record their music, and he fell in love with the genre. And when he went back to Trinidad, he actually tried to recreate it, and ended up with soca. And he actually, if you read his history or if you study him, he credits Dominica for soca music. But soca music has taken off, and I felt as a Dominican that we were kind of left behind, like we were left in the dust. And a huge part of it is that tends to happen a lot to smaller islands. So small islands tend to have, their own niche, their own style, their own way of doing things. That becomes very infectious when people from the bigger islands witness it. They're like, "Oh my God, you guys do this like this," and it blew. And as a result, soca music blew up, but we got put on the back burner. But then we came up with bouillon, which is the goat skin, which is we call it lapo cabuit, along with the accordion, and a lot of different fusions of music, which is known as bouillon. If you listen to soca music today, there is a lot of bouillon. As a matter of fact, Nyla just did her Round and Rosie song was actually produced by a Dominican, and it is after bouillon music. So our music has been. I mean, for me in that moment, I saw people being recognized like Marshall Montano, and Skinny Fabulous, from phenomenal artists. I saw them being recognized for an amazing song that they did that was produced by a Dominican, and there was no Dominican representation in terms of the genre. So that is where this came about. But just to say, I'm not saying that we we didn't do our part in probably not promoting our own genres or our own music. But I feel as Caribbean people, we need to promote unity and oneness. So when one goes up, well, let's take the others with us, because we are bigger together. And I think if we put this thought in practice, then things like getting a genre like soca on the Grammys would be something, because it isn't a thing right now. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I have many thoughts, and I'm so bummed my partner in crime is not here because we have this discussion. Um, and I'll just drop it here, but I think Style and Vibes is probably more appropriate because she has the deep expertise in the area. Um, um, yeah, I'm coming. So
That's okay.
you said I mean, every one of us is feeling that, right?
Yeah.
So it's all relative. You felt that Dominica, and I'm not discrediting, I'm just like broadening the lens a little bit. You feel like Dominica is not giving respect due, as we would say, right? Of what they contribute. And then if you zoom out, you know, there are elements of soca because what Afrobeats was in 2012 isn't what it is or sounds like now. I feel like Afrobeats has taken on some very soca elements to it, right? They sound similar in some ways. And then the Jamaicans are like, Afrobeats is really dancehall, right? And so, every smaller is feeling like they're left out and they're not getting the recognition they deserve, right?
Mm-hmm.
You said you talked about two genres. And I know you know this, but we have to give people grace that they don't know anything, because I also work with the fabulous Alexandria Miller, and we produce Strictly Facts, a guide to Caribbean history and culture. And you'll be surprised at what people do not know
That's true.
about our own culture. I'm not giving anybody a pass, but I'm like, we have the space and the opportunity to tell our story and our history and educate our people, because we assume they know and they do not know.
And the
And it's
information is there. The
yeah,
information is all out there.
it's there, but there's very few people who actually go out and see. You seek that information, you know this, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
another element. The other thing is, we know the nuance for those who are deep in the culture and know the difference. Let's say Trinidad, you think of calypso, you think of soca. Trinidad, whatever they have, you think of Jamaica, you have ska, mento, dancehall, reggae, all of these things, right? We know the nuances in the music. People outside the culture just hear one sound and say, oh, all of this is this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's the same way the African artists are, they may be complaining like they all get bulked into Afro beats
Mm-hmm.
when it's not really Afro beats, right? So when you said a category like soca on the Grammy, and I'm not saying this because reggae has a category, Afrobeats just got a category on the Grammy, and they did not differentiate Tyler as I'm a piano. They was just like Afrobeats. So something to think about, because I don't want to go too deep in it. You just said it, like we have to move as one. So if moving as one is, do we have a Caribbean music category? Like, you know what I mean? It's like we want the Grammys to recognize the specificity of the genres and the music, and maybe it's like rightfully, like you did, it's the Caribbean Music Award that does that specificity, and the bigger shows, all right, let them lump way up in a big category. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm always mindful of the battles that we choose to fight,
Mm-hmm.
and that it doesn't lead to unnecessary division. And I'm not saying that's what you're doing, because I agree with what
Mm-hmm.
you're saying. Because you are here and we're here, you just said it. You
Mm-hmm.
wanted to remind that platform that your duty and responsibility is to make sure that we're all represented. But when
That's
it
it.
comes
That's
to
it.
bigger platforms, we can
Come
compromise and
together,
say
and we can come together
together.
and say, who's the stronger man? Who's stronger in this? Who's stronger in
Like,
this fight?
exactly,
And then we
exactly.
proceed as such, because trying to fight like within ourselves is not worth it. But we can help each other up. We can bring each other up. We have their events across the Caribbean. And now I see it happening more. So I'm not faulting anybody, but you see small artists moving more across the Caribbean and going to perform in Jamaica, in Trinidad, and Barbados. So there's that recognition that's happening, and it's good, and it's good for us as a people. I know, like getting into a time where free movement is becoming more of a thing amongst the Caribbean people. And because of that, we have to understand that there are going to be cultural differences, including our music, and we have to be more accepting of it, as well as see opportunities that could help boost our sectors, our culture, tourism, the economics of it. All of that plays a huge part if we do it together. At the time we're the Caribbean Music Awards, you call yourself the Caribbean Music Awards. you should, do due diligence, we didn't have to necessarily have a genre on there, but we could have done a performance. We could have, because there were a lot of artists that were repeated, so there were multiple soca artists and multiple reggae artists, so we could have had a performance. We didn't have to have a category because we're not big enough to have a category. Same as, Haitian music, like compa and these things, like a little bit goes a long way. So I mean, I wasn't trying to bun out anybody or cuss out anybody. I just felt that, knowing that at the time I was standing there present, that bouillon music was the most popular music for all the carnivals that had just gone, because it did, like, it really was, like, rightfully so. And knowing that there was no recognition in that moment, um I had to say something.
Listen, the fact that I recognize you, it don't mean that everybody else recognize you.
I
It's
know.
a no, it's a testament to me loving my culture and my music. I remembered what you said. I didn't disagree. You had an opportunity and you made a statement, right? We can recall several ish moments in pop history when people made a statement because they had the opportunity. So I wouldn't fault you, and
Well, I
we
think I was faulted to some extent by the fraternity. Like, I think I'm blacklisted from the event. I'm convinced I am blacklisted.
all right, another story for another day. I just
Uh,
no, I think that was an I Lord.
Say what you're thinking.
I I don't think it was done in a distasteful way, right?
Mhm,
I don't think it was. I think like I'm sure people are like, what is that?
mhm,
I'm sure there are people who are like, what is that? And if you take nothing away from it, it's just like by saying what I said that day, some people are like, she talked about some music from Dominica. What they call Bula? Bouillon? Bouillon? Like you know what I mean? Like it at least it's a seed planted. You know what I mean?
And
Like
this year, it's funny enough you'd say that. This year was probably our biggest carnival ever, because the masses that came down. I mean, people did vlogs. Like, I was being tagged on people who vlogged, or people who did little, recap videos of carnival, who'd never been to Dominica, Dominica, heard about carnival, wanted like authentic real mass, because that's what you get when you come to Dominica. Our Juve starts at 4 a.m. and goes till 10, which is crazy. As a matter of fact, it starts at 12, but you just don't go out on the road until 4. But it's crazy. And to hear people's reviews and to see the masses of visitors that came in. I don't want to credit me specifically, but I think the genre has gone so far that people are intrigued, and they want to see, how do these people do it? What do they do? What makes them so special? Why is Booyah music so special? What about the island that we want to explore? So yeah.
yeah, so final point on this, what I was trying to figure out to say is like we all can recognize, we all experience what it's like to feel like we are the underdog,
Hmm.
that we are not being recognized for our contributions, right?
Oof.
Like we all know that feeling. Every Caribbean country, like everyone feels that way. So
Hmm.
we give people grace when they're saying something because there is some truth in it, right? There
Hmm.
because you wouldn't have said it if there wasn't some truth. But like ethnomusicologist said on our show, she just wishes that we don't get too deep in who start what, because then we create the division. So I but again, the whole point of me bringing this up was just like, oh my god, I recognize your face, and I was just like, oh my gosh, she said it, and I was just like, okay, because as a music and history lover, I'm always surprised at what people don't know and what people know. Kudos to you for speaking up, and big ups to, like I said, Dominica on the thing.
Thank
And
you.
congrats for your year. Moving on from that, you have a long list of things that you are doing. What is the thing that you are currently focused on right now? And why did you get into that?
Ooh, the thing, I cannot focus on one thing. It's not possible to focus on one thing because I need to have my hands in at least three, four things at a time. Because I get bored at certain times, or sometimes I get to a point where I may have a block, like a creative block, and if I sit and wonder how am I going to get past this, it just makes it worse. So I get into something else. And while I'm in there, I get inspiration for what I. And so that's so I mean, at any given time, I mean, three, four things. So recently, I won an award at the Toronto Caribbean Tales International Film Festival for my short documentary called Territory. So I'm heavily involved in directorial work, producing work, that sort of stuff. I do a lot of producing work for a UN entity as well. So I'm heavily involved in that. That's what my our hands are actively involved in every single day. I also teach at a university, so so I teach in media and communications faculty at Guelph Humber University. So my hand is involved in this every day. In addition to that, I do my live shows called Jael Joseph Live, which is on my Facebook page. And of late, I've been doing these reviews. So I've been reviewing things, and I have like 500 people logging on just to watch me review anything from carnival to a product that I love to whatever it is, while I eat mango or I eat anything that's in front of me. And I think people probably love to watch me eat more than the review because I always tell them I bite and you swallow for me. So I bite and you just swallow. So I do these, I do my shows, my virtual shows. I do a lot of creative directing work. So for my 40th, I did like a spread of four photos that spans throughout my lifetime in the last 40 years. And those have been getting a lot of attention, like attention both in the Caribbean and outside of the Caribbean. And it's just of me. But if you want to see, just follow my page and you can see the pictures. But that's what I'm in actively. Actively, I have a company called Black Island Girl Multimedia. So I focus a lot of my work in producing podcasts, video, that sort of content.
Yes, so you do multiple things, but the one theme across all of them is media and
Yes,
multimedia. And so
yes.
tell me why you gravitated towards that. What is it about media that sparks your soul fire?
I don't think I gravitated towards it. I think it wanted me. I think it wanted me more than I wanted it because I remember as a child, I grew up in a community, a very small community, and my father was a very active member in my community. He served as a chairman of the village council. He was at one time a principal. My mom was a district nurse. So my family was fairly active in the community. And I remember, ever so often, the main radio station, which is like the nation station, they would contact us. They would call us on the phones, house phone. They'd call my dad because my dad had to give a rundown as to what was going on in the community, because the community spanned a constituency, so like three villages kind of lumped together. So he would give them news from sports to entertainment, whatever's going on in the community. If they're doing a massive cleanup, if there's a beach day, if there's a fun day, whatever it is. And I remember one time they called and my dad wasn't there. And they were like, well, we can talk to you, like you could tell us, and I started telling us, and, and they wanted to talk to me every time after that. And I never really, like, I wanted to be everything else. I wanted to be I wanted to be a dentist. I wanted to be a movie star. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be all these different things, but it always kept coming back to media. So when I moved back to Dominica in 2010, when my mom fell ill, a radio station in Dominica One of the guys was my friend, and he said to me, "Hey, while you're in Dominica, why don't you just do a little stunt? Just to kill time. Do a little something with us and whatever." And I started doing that, and before you know it, I was like producing an entire show. The show became so popular. We had a talent search. People won $15,000. Like it was just crazy, coordinating and producing this show in a small island. And so media always kept like pulling me back in, and I would learn like everything because I didn't want to have to ask somebody to show me. So to edit audio, I learned that very early o'clock. I knew how to edit audio. I started creating ads, and my ads became very popular to this day. Like I could charge the most in Dominica for my ads. So people started requesting my voice to place on their ads, and then people started asking me to be an ambassador for them. So companies would come up to me and say, "Hey, we really like the way that you deliver information. We really like your enthusiasm. We like your vibe. We see people are engaged with you." And I think it's a lot because I love people, and I genuinely love people, as I try to show that day on that stage. I genuinely love my people, and I really I like to have a good time. And they tell sometimes people will reach out to me and say, "Oh, if you can catch Jael in full makeup on her page, sometimes you'll catch her like she just wake up with everything in her eyes." Because I try to bring my most authentic self, every single time, be it virtually on video or be it on radio, and people gravitated towards that, and people they loved it. And that's so media took me, media wanted me.
And you answered, right? I mean, the beauty, and you understood this. You could resist, but then, then you yield to it, right? And that's what you
Mhm.
did. You kind of just leaned into it, and it sounded like you just embraced the opportunities. Like, once it comes, you're just like, all right, I'm gonna try this. No big deal. And you just kind of took off with it. Where do you accredit that I can do this, I'm gonna learn to do this, and I'm not afraid to do this? Because I'm sure maybe there was something in childhood, but at some point you were just like, you know what, I'm just going to lean into that. Was there a particular time? Was there an incident? Or you just always was like, yeah, I'm gonna figure this out. Nobody not gonna tell me what to do. I'm just going to go full speed ahead. Share a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, my father never, or he always encouraged us. My father always wanted boys, and he only had girls. And so he kind of treated us almost like boys. Like he told us you could do anything you want to do. Like you don't have to make no man cut style on you. Like my father taught us how to fix a ruptured pipe. He taught us how to do electric, how to connect our entertainment system. My sisters and I redid our roof. Like after hurricane, we went up on the roof and redid it ourselves, three of us, and people were just in awe that three women were up on the roof because my dad taught us everything, right? So it was always instilled in me from early o'clock that whatever the hell you want to do, you can do it. You just put your mind to it. And I'm not one that procrastinates. If I feel deep within my soul that I'm gonna go for this, I go for it. But what really did it for me, I believe, was after Hurricane Maria. So after Hurricane Maria, I went back to Canada. I was pregnant. I was 6.5 months pregnant with my second, and I was at a position where I was like, "What the hell am I gonna do with the rest of my life?" Like where I call home, I was just completely destroyed. Marketing, which was a huge part of my income, was not necessary because nobody needed to market anything. And I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And it came to me in the form of a dream from my mom. It's like, go back to school and go to do journalism. And I was lying on my bed after a C-section, and I went online. Yes, girl, after the C-section, and I researched the universities and stuff, and I applied. I applied to two universities. They both accepted me, and the September I was in school, and I fast tracked because a lot of the things that I was being taught, I already knew it, but I felt I needed to have the paper to prove that I know how to do it. So I ended up completing a 4 year in just a little short shy of 3 years. So I completed it. I fast tracked. I was doing like 7 courses when everybody else was doing 3 and 4. And I was able to complete that. And then ending of completing my undergrad in journalism was when COVID happened. And I was like, oh gosh, what am I gonna do? Like, who's gonna hire me? I was panicking about my future. And I saw an opportunity to do my master's because I'm like, I'm gonna be home anyways. Might as well do something. So I went and I did my master's, and I finished it the year later. And I did for my master's. I did a master's in media production. That's what my documentary came out of. So that was part of my master's research project. And my professors were all like, you should submit to festivals or whatever. I only submitted to 3. I got accepted to all 3 that I submitted. I was nominated for one, official selection for another, and I won at the Caribbean Tales International Film Festival.
Like I said, I sense the energy, and that's why I asked that question, like where does it come from? Because, you know, that drive, a lot of people want it, but I realize that the people who do extremely well are those that there's a seed planted in childhood and it's connected to a relationship that means a lot. And so you are not only doing this from yourself, it's part of keeping your father's memory alive, right?
It is. It is.
Because he is the one that really instilled it. So I can sense that, right? So tell me and the audience about this documentary, this project that you've done. Talk a little bit about that and the journey to creating that.
So I had to select something that I was going to do my research project on, and I wanted it to be something that was meaningful to me. Meaningful in the sense of it had to appeal to culture, genre, my community. It had to be something that's part of me. I mean, being in Canada, it's not very easy to actually get into your own culture, especially as a Dominican, because you have so many different cultures converging. And yes, of course, we do represent for each island when we have to. But I felt like I needed to go back home to do this research project. And, just kind of doing a little bit of research, as a Black woman, as a Black Caribbean woman, um, I started, realizing that, you know, again, we're going through this whole civil unrest, in the world. And, we want all of these equality, and we want, to be included, and we want all of these different things. And I looked at our indigenous people in Dominica, and I said, hmm, we can't treat the people who gave us all what we have well, and we expect to be treated well. Like, how does it work? So I wanted to understand them a little bit and understand how they lived and everything. And when I started reading about them, I saw a lot of negative stereotypes being brought forward about them. I mean, if we know the history, they were called Caribs and Arawaks. That's what they were called. That actually wasn't their names, but that was what the colonizers called them, right? And when I started reading more about it, I realized a lot of people were going to research their communities and taking so much but not really giving back anything. A lot of white scholars, there were also, Black scholars. There was some that meant well, because I would hope they mean well. But one of the things that you learn when you learn about truth and reconciliation is that you should not take from a community that has been plowed through so much. So I write, I wanted to create something that was in their own voice, that was theirs. And I started to look at, their identity, and how they see themselves, and how people see them, and all of the negative stereotypes, and all of these different things. And then I started to look at the political aspects of it, and how things shift, and then I fell on the land. And this part really bothered me the most, right? Of all of the things, of all of the words that they could have been called, this part bothered me the most. It's because the history of indigenous people is that they were all sequestered to reserves. We know that everywhere we know about indigenous people, they're sequestered to reserves. And this is the same in Dominica. So in 1902, they were placed on a reserve. It was given to them as if this was land that you could do whatever you want with. It's yours, right? But I quickly learned that it's communal land and they really cannot do anything with it. So when you think of me as an Afro Caribbean person, I can go, my father leave a piece of land for me. I can take my piece of land, go to the registry, register, get my title, go to the bank, say to the bank, I need to go study. Or my child need to go study. Or I need to put down a house. Or I need to start up a business and use that as collateral. Indigenous people don't have that. Granted, it's their land, right? So they're not allowed to use their land for that sort of economic advancement. And that troubled me. And I started to realize that what a lot of people may think is good is not actually good, in the sense of, if you're going to do this, there needs to be a trust where they can tap into it, into that trust, so they can get economic advancement. So if they want to go to school, if they want to start businesses, so the land is, can only be used to plant. And then there's a situation of wastage, a lot of wastage, because obviously there are not means and ways for them to actually manufacture and produce from, for example, their cassava, to produce cassava powder into flour. They have wasting of plantains and dashings and all of that on the land. Some of it is not being exported, and even with getting exported, there are all of these restrictions as to what other countries will take and what they won't. So essentially they're disadvantaged as well as disenfranchised. And I was like, you know what, let me see why and how I could help shift that. And I started to notice that their language was dying, the indigenous language. So I decided that I was going to put language and land together and see what commonalities lay between the two and how they can use those two to reclaim their identity. And that's how territory came about.
Wonderful. And so, why don't you share with the audience the name of the indigenous people? We know that the colonizers call them Caribs or Arawaks, but their name.
The group that I studied, they're the Kalinagos. They're the one of the largest indigenous groups in the Eastern Caribbean. And the majority of them live in Dominica. So there's about 3 to 4 thousand of them in Dominica. And they're a nation within a nation, and it's very interesting. I got to study their practices and their agricultural practices, and realize that, oh my God, Dominica is blessed because of these people, because of the way that they use their land. Like, if they use the land like what was done to Haiti with the coffee, then we would be in problems in Dominica. We would have infertile soil, right? Their methods of irrigation, and just all of their practices, just the spirituality that goes along with who they are as a people. And I found it very interesting. And it just happens that my great grandmother is also Kalinago, so I felt a connection to the tribe, and I because it runs through my blood. And I wanted to focus my documentary on them. So essentially, territory follows around three individuals, two women and a man, and they speak about their struggles within their community, and yeah, that's essentially what it is.
Lovely. Where can people watch this documentary? Is it easily accessible? What's the deal with it?
So it's not easily accessible because a huge part of it was the fact that it was at festivals. But now it's available on my website. So blackislandgirl.com. If you go under documentaries, it is available on there. It's actually $4.99 US. You can purchase it and you can view it. It's about 24 minutes long. And since doing this work, well, even before completion of my work, I started, sponsoring their Kalinago spelling bee competition. So I do all the prizes for them. So a lot of the proceeds go back to the community, because I feel like they need to we need to reclaim their language. Their language right now is in French. So it's called it's there's a Kalinago dictionary, but it's in French. And I feel like it needs to be converted to English. There are certain things that need to be done, trying to work with different NGOs to get certain things off the ground. But essentially starting to get the children who are coming up to learn bits and pieces of their language, so that it does not die. Because, as you know, a lot of times when people lose their language, they tend to lose their sense of identity, and who they are as a people. And I think it's very important that they still remember these things, and hopefully Dominica as an island will start to embrace it, and it'll be represented in the schools, or taught in the schools, because they are our first people, and I think they deserve that respect.
Thanks for sharing that. And I agree about language. In multiple conversations over the years, I've always talked about when I go back to Jamaica, how my friends would say, "You sound worse than when you were living in Jamaica." And what they don't understand is, like, when you live here, my Jamaican accent, my Jamaican dialect is what I have. So I hold on to it. And I'm a go down in the patois. I'm a do all that I do because it is part of this identity of mine. So, language is very, very, very important to how we see ourselves or how we identify. So
Mhm.
I can relate to that. All right. So what is next for you? What is next on the agenda of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? The list keep going down the list. What is coming up next? You're like rubbing your head because you're like, why does Oman keep asking me this? I have so much things on my list. But
I
top
do.
the top two things that are your priority and your agenda and that you would like to share with the Carry On Friends audience.
Well, right now I'm working on a film on migration. Um, so I don't know when this will be done, because I've gotten into a lot of roadblocks. A lot of my films are I self-funded, as well as through angel investors. So sometimes I run into situations where I got to take a pause, because you run out of money and whatever the case might be. And because, although I'm a Canadian, because my film is outside of Canada, as well as I don't use um, Canadian resources, like I don't use camera crew. I use everyone that's indigenous to Dominica. It's harder for you to get funding for these kinds of projects, which is something that I feel is whack, because we should have access to that funding, or at least some of it, so because we do bring our films back to Canada. So that is my roadblock right now. So I'm kind of like on a pause with that. But I also have a brand called 767 Girls Rock. And it was an actual event, but I've been testing the waters a little bit, and a bit of discouragement kind of steered me in a different path. And I'm hoping to start running it as a series, so it'll be like a video series that would go out, instead of an event, because an event kind of isolates it to one time. One of my good friends actually passed away recently, and she was one of the first people I featured at that event. And having footage of her speaking about her life was rare. So people saw how important it is to tell our stories, or to at least capture our stories, for because you never know. I mean, we didn't expect her to pass away so soon. And it's there. This piece of history is there forever. Nobody can erase it, right? It'll be there forever, with especially with the internet. So I'm hoping that to put more of my energy into this. And this year, I'm just gonna go where the wind takes me. I don't want to say I'm heavily focused on certain things. And if it doesn't go well, I get disappointed or whatever it is. I feel like in the last 10 years, I've gone so hard that this year I can take a pause and let things come to me because I think I've put in the work. I've proved myself in the literal and on paper. So I think people want to work with me. I'm ready to work collaboratively. I do a lot of emceeing work, so I'm ready to do more emceeing across the Caribbean. I'm actually in the process of looking for a manager, somebody to manage me and really help me, establish myself better. Because one thing about us Aquarians is that we tend to take on a lot, and sometimes we can't manage our own shit properly. And I really want to be able to carry my ship or steer my ship right. And I have two boys, so I feel getting somebody to manage me will help me to work with them more, with their schoolwork, be around them more, that sort of stuff, because I've been away from them for long periods of time. So wherever the wind takes me, carry on. Wherever the wind takes me, I will go. And nothing set in stone, nothing formalized or established. But I'm ready. I'm ready to work whenever anyone's ready to work with me.
First, condolences on the loss of your friend. Um, but also, I think what you just said is such a great way to wrap up, right? You said Aquarians, but let's just balloon it out to everyone who's just been going hard for so long, doing a lot. And you're just like, it's time to just fall back a little bit. Let a natural course come in, but also I'm actively looking for the right support to help me be better with my time, my energy, so I can prioritize what's important. And I
Hmm.
think that's just such an important call out for you to make, right? Because at the top of the conversation, you're going down a long list. But here you're able to put a bookend and let people know, like, yeah, we could be busy, we could do all of these things, but at some point we have to kind of slow it down because for a variety of reasons. It's tactical, it's more strategic. Someone can focus on this so I can focus on other things. And I'd love that you said that because we don't want to give people the perception that you just go hard 100% of the times. That's not realistic. And I love that you shared that. And you're vulnerable about trying to get a manager so I can spend more time with my kids. I've been away from them long periods of time, right? That's an awareness. And I love that you said, you know what? I'm just going to go where the wind flows because or the wind blows because I know all the work that I've put in. I've proven to myself and others what I'm able to accomplish. And that is so important because we're constantly working so hard to prove to others, to ourselves what we know we can do. We've proven it. We just then have to just say, you know what? Let me just continue to do the work I know I can do, and I don't have to go overboard to do it. I know what I can do. And it's
Hmm.
just for those who recognize what I like, freeing yourself up to attract those to
Hmm.
you who recognize that. So I really appreciate that you shared that. And I hope you know that was a powerful statement to make. Um, Given that you said, oh, I do the long list. And everybody listening can say, yeah, man, I know that list. My list long too. But at the end of that, you still have to recognize, like, sometimes, you know, there's a season, right? There's a time and place for everything. Like you talk about the Kalinago. I'm pretty sure that one of their methods is there's a time to work the land, and there's a time to let the land rest, right? So it's important that we get rest and just say, all right, I work the land, let it replenish itself. Let me step back and let it do what it has to do. So I appreciate you sharing that story. And we're just making the connections there with culture, land, and First People, and just media. I wasn't expecting to have a conversation about media, but like you said, it's and like all of my conversations, it's wherever you bring it, I'll come along with you on that conversation. So I'm so glad to be now connected with you. You know,
Same here, Kenya.
yeah, I look at my guests like, there's not, you don't come and you go off, we are connected, especially because this is the Caribbean American, I say Caribbean American because I'm in America, but it's really about our culture and our experiences. And I love when we get to share with others the culture and can let people meet other people from the culture, because for some people this is the closest they may meet someone
Hmm.
from Dominica, and this is the closest they might hear about the Kalinago. You know what I mean? So
I know what
I
you mean.
it's really making those connections. So why don't you tell the community of friends where they can find you, your fancy 40th birthday pictures on the internet, and all this good stuff.
I can. I mean, my website is jaeljoseph.com. So that's Jael Joseph, Joseph.com. My handles are Jael Joseph all through, so you can get me Jael Joseph on Instagram, Jael Joseph LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, a little TikTok every now and again. You can catch me on Facebook. I am Jael J. Or Jael Joseph. A lot of folks follow me that way. Most people find me through my website. I also have blackislandgirl.com, where most of my production work sits. And that's really where people can find me. I am heavily on social media. A day doesn't go by without I post. If you want to connect, most people, once you're on my website, you can find me. If you want to connect, if you're interested in working with me, just reach out.
Thank you, Jael. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And as I love to say at the end of every episode, walk good.
Thank you very much for having me, Carrie Ann, and thank you very much for allowing the space for me to share my story among friends.
Awesome.